Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing the Radeon RX 6600 in Starfield. This is the weakest GPU that comes bundled with Starfield, so I'm actually really curious to see what it's capable of, especially considering that this is probably the most demanding title out there. So this one is the Afox model of the card. We are running it with the latest AMD drivers as usual, and I'm not manually overclocking the card. You can see all of the GPU specs right here in Tech Power-Ups. GPU Z resizable bar or AMD SAM is enabled, and over on the left, preparing it with the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D and 32GB of RAM. This CPU won't be a bottleneck to a 6600, it will be with like a 4090, but not here, okay? Let's get into it, shall we? Alright guys, here we have it. Let's walk around for a little bit while you try to guess what settings we're utilizing. You know what? This is actually pretty decent compared to other things that we've tried so far. Okay, I'm just gonna say that. It drops into the 40s at times, as you can see, 49 right here. So that means that it will drop into the low 40s whenever everything hits up, you know, and you start seeing some really big action on screen with smoke effects, explosions, and so on. But over here is actually one of the most intensive areas in the entire map, and it's in the 50s. Considering that this game performs just like 10 FPS faster with 3060 Ti, it's actually quite a big deal for this 6600, you know. It's playable, I would say. We're playing at 1080p using low settings and without any sharpening going on or upscaling. It's actually using native resolution at the moment, not the low settings preset, which sets the resolution scale to 50%. And yeah, the game looks okay. You know, there's not that much of a difference between low and ultra in this one, honestly. I mean, from low to medium, you can actually see quite a bit of a difference in visuals, but medium to high, high to ultra, not really. Look at this, it's smooth, it's playable, VRAM is completely enough, of course. This game doesn't eat a lot of VRAM, and I mean, I was just expecting slower, okay? Let's try it with the actual default low settings preset, which sets render resolution to 50% using FSR2, and yeah, this looks pretty bad. You can get 60 plus FPS pretty much all of the time, I guess. I don't know, actually. It's getting 70 there. It's dropping into the 60s at times, you know. I would much rather play this with 100% resolution scale and 60 plus FPS in other planets, you know, the ones without many cities and stuff like that. And whenever I got to these huge cities, drop a little bit into the 50s and 40s, then have this blurry mess of an image quality which looks absolutely terrible. No. Good thing is you can get 60 plus FPS if you fiddle around with the resolution scale right here. I'm gonna try it with like 66%. That should be quality FSR2, and it looks a lot better than 50%, that's for sure. And now we're seeing like 60 plus still. Okay, alright, so it's definitely gonna drop from 60 since we're getting 60 here already. So in that more dense foresty area or gardeny area with more vegetation, it will drop, and there's another world or another part of this world, I'm not sure, where the density of vegetation is a lot higher, and you're gonna drop FPS a little bit more than over in this area. Anyway, look at this. Not bad, 64, 65, 63... I mean, why is it dropping more over in that part of the city, looking in this direction, than here? The NVIDIA GPUs actually dropped more there, but it's apparently for AMD GPUs, that's not the most intensive area. It's pretty alright of an experience like this, but it's still pretty soft to my eyes. Probably because we haven't really used any sharpening. The sharpening won't really lower your FPS. It just makes the image quality sharper, and it looks a little bit better like this for sure. Yeah, we should have been using that from the get-go. So yeah, if you have a smaller 1080p monitor like 23 inches, 24 inches, even 21.5 inches, this will look pretty good. That said, let's stop it right there. The dynamic resolution is turned on, but this only kicks in below 30 frames per second, so we're not really gonna hit the dynamic resolution scale threshold here. And I want to try it with 80% resolution scale, okay? Because 80% looks very similar to native resolution with the sharpening going on. You can still see some artifacting right there, for example. Yeah, that looks pretty bad, actually. Oh boy, I missed the LSS already. Look at the shadows as well. What the heck? Okay, I'm gonna start counting the FPS again. I found that with other GPUs, especially at 1440p resolution, 80% FSR2 looks pretty damn good. But that was before I tried this game with the LSS. The LSS has definitely the upper hand. Unfortunately, you gotta install a mod for it. So it's not a terrible experience by any means, guys. It's just not that smooth anymore and not that stable because it drops from 60. And once again, in fights in open areas with a lot of buildings and vegetation and stuff like that, you will feel the slowdowns into the 50s at times, with explosions as well and smoke effects. So there's that, but it doesn't stutter, so the game's actually playable like this. Next, instead of playing with like medium, high, and ultra settings with this GPU, I'm actually going to utilize the hardware unboxed optimized settings, which are optimized for the best visuals to performance ratio. Right, so I just loaded another game, guys, and let's go over the settings first, okay? So these are the settings. I set the settings that they say no more than high to high, and the settings that they say as high as the GPU allows to high as well. So basically that leaves us with medium shadow quality, high settings, low crowd density, and high settings over here as well. And FSR2 is set to 80%, which again I found to be a good balance between visuals and performance. And like this, you can expect around 40 plus frames per second, I would say. Maybe a little bit less sometimes. I'm not sure if I would play on low settings instead of this. Probably not, you know. You lose a few FPS compared to low, but the game does look a little bit better at the same time. And since you can't really get 60 plus FPS all of the time without dropping the resolution scale to 66%, well, you might be better off increasing the settings a little bit and have a little bit better visual fidelity from your game, right? It definitely feels a little bit rougher compared to what we saw previously, low settings, you know. Alright guys, next let's try the medium settings preset with 69% sharpness, motion blur set to off, and the shadow quality still on medium. Like, these are almost the hardware unboxed settings. The only setting that they tell you to use on like an exact value is shadow quality and crowd density on low, but this is more of a CPU bound setting anyways, and we got a 5800X 3D, so we don't really need that. I'm just gonna keep it on medium settings preset, guys, okay? And the render resolution scale is set to 50% right now, which is, again, the default for the medium settings preset, and it looks pretty bad. Look at that. There is so much pixelation here with 50% resolution scale. Kind of ridiculous, dude. It's like they didn't even test the settings. You know, they didn't see what it looks like. Anyway, let's do 66% resolution scale right now. Now, the medium settings preset with FSR2 set to quality seems to be enough to give us a 60 FPS average with 1% lows in the 40s, but in reality, it won't really drop from 40 FPS many times. And I'm sorry about the screen tearing, since we are close to that 60 FPS mark. It happens a lot more here. That's because of the capture card. Capture cards are insanely bad. Alright? I am yet to find a capture card that actually works properly in every single way that it's supposed to work. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's stop it there. We got 57 FPS average, 44 1% lows. Again, it's alright. Would I play on low settings with 66% instead of this? On low settings, it actually didn't drop from 60 FPS on quality FSR2, or it barely did. So maybe just go for that 60 FPS experience all of the time, because, again, the game doesn't really look all that different, does it? Alright, let's try the high settings preset right now. I'm just gonna disable the motion blur here. Oh, and the render resolution is set to 62%, which is the default for high settings. You know, high settings in this game don't even give you close to native resolution. That's crazy. And even the ultra settings give you 75% resolution scale. Oh my gosh. All right, let's do this, guys. 50 something frames per second is what we're getting here on high, and yeah, it drops into the 40s. Not completely awful. Once again, for an RX 6600, I was expecting a little bit slower performance, getting like lower 40s right here. I can safely say that this game runs a lot better on AMD cards, and I've noticed the same thing with the 6700 XT as well. That was around 15% faster than the 3070, and it's usually the other way around, or like not really 15%, but the 3070 is usually a little bit faster, like 5 to 10% than the 6700 XT in some titles. So what we're seeing here is still a playable experience with a little bit softer of an image compared to 66% or 80% FSR2, but it's seeable, I guess. It's the way it's meant to be played on high settings preset, and it's one of the most intensive areas in the game, and it's only dropping into like the low 40s. I'm gonna set it to 66% now. It should run pretty much the same. Yeah, it's the same thing. 41 FPS right here, so it will drop into the low 40s. Remember, this is worst case scenario for AMD, standing right here looking in this direction, and we're getting 40 frames. So it's basically the same thing. We might lose 1 or 2 frames per second compared to 62% resolution scale. It also looks almost the same. I mean, it's a 4% difference in resolution scale. You can't really notice that, honestly. So I'm gonna bump it up right now to 80%. It's getting 40s. Okay, now it's definitely gonna drop into the 30s because we're not even looking in the intensive direction. It's already gotten 40 flat. 37 right there. 38. Okay. Yeah, I would avoid the drops into the 30s, guys. I think medium settings already gave you the best visuals to performance ratio, if not the hardware unboxed settings, which set a lot of things to high, and it was dropping into what, the 40s, low 40s, maybe high 30s as well. So not ideal, once again, but hey, it's still playable, guys. Let's disable upscaling now on high settings, and I want to see what it's capable of. Oh boy, this is native resolution. You know, it's still not dropping from 30. That's really impressive, actually. What the heck, dude? It looks a little bit soft, though. I would definitely not use these settings. These are just for testing purposes. But if you are one of those people who enjoy the game at 30 FPS, maybe play with a controller, you know, on your sofa, and add a little bit of motion blur to disguise the choppiness of the image at 30 FPS, yeah, this is capable of achieving that at 30 plus FPS all of the time. So you can lock it and have that Xbox Series S experience, always at native resolution 1080p. Now let's try it on ultra settings. First with 66% resolution scale and 69% sharpness and no motion blur, and ultra settings is giving us very similar performance to native high settings, native 1080p high settings. This is with quality FSR2, of course. So it's a little bit lower of a resolution scale, but with the sharpening going on, it's not too terrible compared to native. You know what? That's pretty impressive, once again. I'm not gonna lie. I just thought the 6600 was going to be a little bit slower. In this area, it's usually pretty intensive as well. Getting 33 there. Oh, and we need to find Bob in this game and kill that bastard, of course. I totally forgot about that. I've been forgetting a lot of things, you know, pumping out these videos. Can't think properly sometimes about what I am really supposed to do. Kill Bob and call this Slowfield instead of Starfield. Let's do the default ultra settings, which sets the resolution scale to 75%. And okay, we lose a couple of frames. Instead of 33 or 34, we're getting 31 and 32. Okay, but it's still hanging in there, you know? It's still hanging in there. And FSR2 at 75% doesn't look awful. Also, what happened to the fire? It's noisier now. But yeah, with the FPS so close to 30, I don't recommend this, guys. I prefer to have a little bit of breathing room because, you will drop FPS a little bit more than in this city, for sure. Again, in those aforementioned scenarios with smoke effects, ships taking off, for example, fire effects, but explosions and stuff. Yeah, it will drop. And there's also another few planets with a lot more vegetation where it's going to drop a little bit more than that as well. Touch 30 FPS there. So the fact that you get 30 flat all of the time right here, or 30 plus all of the time, doesn't mean that it's going to get 30 plus all of the time everywhere else. And it also doesn't mean that you're going to get 30 to 40 most of the time in your gameplay experience, because if you spend your time flying in space or in barren worlds, you're going to get higher FPS, of course. Alright, lastly, I want to check it out with ultra settings and the upscaling turned off. And this is where it's gonna put it to its knees, my friends. It's like it got an arrow to the knee, and now it just can't run the game anymore. Right? So it's probably gonna retire to be a guard or something in a castle. Yes. Anyway, yeah, it's dropping from 30 FPS very often. In fact, it's getting very close to 30 most of the time. So I would avoid this at all costs. This and high settings as well. Just stick to medium. It worked very well, as you saw. I think we should go ahead and set it to low settings again and play at 1440p just for a little bit at low only. Wait a second. No way. It's a lot better than I expected. This is native 1440p. Dude, I actually remember the 3060 Ti to achieve very similar FPS, maybe a little bit higher than this. But what the actual hell? The 6600 is just stretching its legs in this one. It doesn't feel like it has an arrow to the knee anymore, my friends. It's still dropping into the 30s, so not ideal, but wow. Crazy stuff, actually. That means that with FSR2, it will probably run pretty well. Let's do quality first. That's looking pretty good. Not gonna lie, at 1440p, FSR2 works pretty well at 66% scaling. You can still see a little bit of softness, you know, a little bit of pixelation. For example, over there, that looks pretty awful, especially compared to what DLSS can do, and over there as well. But hey, it's passable. It's definitely passable and better than 1080p resolution. Even native 1080p looked a little bit worse than this, in my opinion. Ugh, look at those shadow details, my friends. That's awful. What the hell is happening here? Like, why does it look like this in darker areas? It's really bad, dude. And why does the lighting change so much whenever you are inside and outside? Like, take a look at the sky. I wish the sky looked like this instead of like this. It's like it's having a green tint over everything. Reminds me of Battlefield 3 with a blue tint. You know what? Do you think that Battlefield 3 looks better than Slowfield? I mean, in some ways, it might actually do. Maybe not, guys. That's a 2011 title. I haven't played it in a while. Nostalgia is speaking to me. It was one of the best looking games back in the days. I don't know, man. I don't know. We probably gotta try some Battlefield 3. But just before we go to Battlefield to see the graphics, let's see this on Ultra and 1440p native resolution. Just to take a look at some things, you know, the textures, for example. I think that bothers me more than it should is that a lot of this grass and vegetation is actually static, like the trees. You know, they don't move. Well, they're slightly moving there, but it's very, very minor. Look at the trees there. No movement whatsoever. But there is wind because these over here actually do move a little bit, as you can see. Right? There is wind. And look at the water as well, so we can compare it a little bit. On ultra settings, it actually looks pretty good. Alright, that's it. Let's move to Battlefield and finish the video with that. Alright guys, here we have it. This is Battlefield 3 at 1440p using ultra settings. This is Caspian Border, guys. It's looking pretty good for a 2011 title, isn't it? I mean, I'm not gonna say it looks better than Starfield. And the vegetation, although it's lacking a little bit of ambient occlusion and stuff, it actually moves. All of it moves, aside from these little flowers. But yeah, the grass moves And in Starfield, there is a lot of grass that doesn't move. The trees in Starfield also don't move whatsoever for some reason. It's pretty weird, at least in the area that we tested. So yeah, I wouldn't say that these games are 12 years apart. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one very soon. As always, love you all. Bye-bye.